All right, welcome everybody. We could all just grab a seat, maybe silence our phones while we're all here together. Welcome to Searchlight. My name is Damon McCool. I work here at Eastern State Penitentiary. Before I bring our speakers on stage, please allow me a moment to tell you a little bit about where we are. Eastern State was built in 1829 on a cherry orchard just outside of Philadelphia. It is perhaps best known for its architecture, which is radial in design and resembles the spokes of a wheel. This architecture has been replicated hundreds of times internationally. It is so closely associated with our collective imagery of what a prison should look like that it even appears in video games. Eastern State was founded on a singular principle, that rehabilitation for people in prison was only possible through solitary confinement. And this idea was tested on thousands of men, women, and children for over 80 years, until 1913, when Eastern State formally abandoned solitary confinement in favor of a more congregate arrangement. Eastern State was a hub for leaders in faith, medicine, academia, and trade. By the time Eastern State Penitentiary closed in 1971, the building had incarcerated over 86,000 people, employed thousands more, and hosted countless visitors. Today, Eastern State is a stabilized ruin, historic site, and museum. Most visitors experience the site through a self-guided audio tour, and Eastern State also provides guided interpretation to tens of thousands of visitors each year. In 2014, Eastern State introduced the Big Graph, which quantitatively measures mass incarceration over time and by race. As you can see here, mass incarceration is a uniquely American phenomenon. The Big Graph has a partner exhibit. It's called Prisons Today, Questions in the Age of Mass Incarceration. There, visitors are encouraged to consider their relationship to the criminal justice system and mass incarceration. Eastern State's daytime attendance has increased 4 times in the last 10 years. Today, we welcome over 250,000 visitors every year, which is precisely why Eastern State Penitentiary is building a brand new state-of-the-art visitor center, which, for the first time, will have modern restrooms. If you are interested in connecting with Eastern State on a deeper level, please consider becoming a member. You can learn more about membership at easternstate.org/membership. Eastern State hosts all kinds of events like this one, Searchlight, which takes place on the first Tuesday of every month. It's from 6 to 7 p.m. It's always free. It's open to the public, and there is a reception to follow. Next month, our speaker is Nicole Fleetwood. She just recently published a book. She's going to talk about that, and this Searchlight next month is a partnership with Mural Arts of Philadelphia as well. So we really hope that you'll join us for that. And tonight, if I can introduce our 2 speakers. Sorry, the font is really small on this computer. Malik Neal is a founding member and director of the Philadelphia Bail Fund. He's joined by North Philly resident and community activist Dante Jones. I'm going to be asking them some questions about bail in Philadelphia and the work that they do with the Philadelphia Bail Fund. So please join me in welcoming Malik Neal and Dante Jones. So feel free to move closer if that helps. So first I'd like to ask, just so that we're all on the same page, what is bail, how is it used today, and what exactly is the Philadelphia Bail Fund intended to do? Dante, you can take it off. Malik.
Okay, so bail is a, okay. So bail is a, all right. I do this everywhere I go to. Speaking to the mic, all right. So bail is pretty much it's a cash bargaining system where you, once you're arrested and you're charged, you go in front of a magistrate who, based upon your charges and your criminal history, decides what monetary amount is necessary for you to secure your freedom until you face the charges that are put upon you.
Thank you. And we'll get into exactly what a magistrate is and what that person does in just a moment. Malik, tell us how you're involved with the bail fund.
Well, let me just add to what Dante said. Initially, bail was set up to be basically a guarantee that the person would come back to court. But in practice, what it's become is a system that has resulted in the jailing of mainly poor and black folks in Philadelphia and across the country. And right now, close to about 500,000 folks are in jail just based on the fact that they can't afford to pay their freedom. And so, I guess to tell you, and I should say, the Philadelphia Bail Fund, we are a nonprofit organization that works to free as many of our neighbors as possible and really try to advocate every day to put ourselves out of business in the sense that we don't want to exist. We're trying to fight for a system that's truly just and doesn't hold people just because of their ability to pay. I think my connection to this work is both as an advocate and as someone who's been a victim of this brutal system that we call cash bail. And so I think my interest really began about 9 years ago, 2011, which was probably the most difficult and trying year of my life, where my father was arrested on a drug possession charge and bail was set at $250,000, which was something that at the time our family could not afford. And I think when I look back at that time, I just think of just how just the complete devaluing and brutality and dehumanization that took place. And so, I'll tell you a little bit about what happened in those 2 years that my dad was held, because the judge at the time didn't care too much about those things, but it sure as hell meant a lot to our family at that time. And so, my dad had been working for 5 years, lost his job. There was graduations that couldn't be attended, events in our family, deaths in the family that he couldn't attend just because of our inability to pay. And I think a couple of things that taught me was, one, my dad was incarcerated not because of what he did, because he hadn't been convicted, but really because of who he was, which is a poor black man in Philadelphia. And the interesting thing about that story is that the police officers who arrested him were later indicted and the charges were expunged. Because it's a long story, but which I won't get into. But now that my dad has no record, but I realized that time we're never going to get back. And I decided at that time that one, our system treats you better if you're rich and guilty than if you're poor and innocent. But also, I love this is saying by Angela Davis that she decided that she was no longer going to accept the things she couldn't change, but she was going to change the things she couldn't accept. And for me, at that moment, I realized that this was something that I really wanted to do to try to really change the system, and found some other folks in Philadelphia who wanted to do that, and we started the Bail Fund roughly 2 years ago with the goal of freeing as many people and really trying to dismantle the system of oppression.
Thank you. So we know that the bail fund, we know what it's trying to achieve, right? It's trying to pay bail for folks that can't afford it. Where is that fund coming from? Where are those funds coming from? Can you tell us just a little bit about that?
Yeah, this is what I think is so amazing, that all of our funds are coming from public donations. And so I see some people here in the audience who funded us, but we get donations from the public. And the great thing about bail funds, and why they're sustainable, is that at the conclusion of a case, if the person shows all their court dates, 100% of the funds come back to the bail fund. And so that's really why we're able to be sustainable. And we have about, of the folks we bailed out, 93% show to all their court dates. And so we're both paying to free people, but also working with people through their cases so that they show up, and then we get those funds back to free other people. So it's a revolving fund in that sense. But I think in terms of, I think it says a lot just about citizen engagement that we have so many Philadelphians who decide to give funds to us to do this work.
Yeah, I actually wanted to unpack that last point in just a minute. Both of you chime in here. I wanted to know if anything surprised you about the public's willingness to pay for a stranger's bail, if I can put it in those terms.
I feel like I've been talking enough.
Yeah, surprise. So, me personally, the way I know Malik is, I was arrested and I was given a bail. And it was $20,000, but it could have been $20 million for me at the time because it just wasn't going to happen. And I had no idea. They called me out and they told me I'm released. And I go for him and they told me my bail was paid by Malik Neal. I had no idea. It made me very uncomfortable. And furthermore, they didn't just bail me out. Every court date, an Uber pulled up in front of my house and took me to court. Malik reached out to me and took me to dinner because he wanted to know who I was after he bailed me out. And I asked him, I said, how do you choose who you bail out? It's a violent crime, this or that. And he said, I don't presume who's innocent or not. I look for who needs bail and I supply it. And
Bail funds plus.
the bail. The particular case, it went on for 1 year and 4 months. And had I not been bailed out by the bail fund, I would have sat incarcerated for that 1 year and 4 months. That case is dismissed now. I was innocent, and the main thing is when you're sitting in there and your freedom is withheld, you're very apt to take the deal, that they offer you because your time is the one thing you can't get back. So, having that support with bail and being able to come home, it gave me the courage to say, I didn't do this, and I'm not going to accept it, and I'm not going to take a deal, and I'm going to fight. And I did it, and I'm sitting here today, and I told Malik how much I appreciate it, and if he ever needs me after that, call me up.
Thanks, Dante. So I recently attended a bail hearing, which in Philadelphia is open to the public, and the experience was eye-opening for me. Can you tell us a little bit about how a bail hearing is arranged and who is present? So what does that look like?
I can start off with that. Sure. So in Philadelphia, bail hearings they happen 24/7, so every 4 hours people are arraigned. And I think last time we checked, there's about 40,000 people that go through in a year. And the interesting thing about Philadelphia, unlike other cities, is there's no attorney present. And so there are representatives from the district attorney and the public defender's office. And there's a magistrate who's not a judge, who's just been appointed by the president judge. And the people who are arrested aren't present in the room either. They're videoed in through CCTV from the police stations. And so what you have is this sort of assembly line-like system where folks are going through, and I think the ACLU did a study on the average, and I think it's about 90 seconds that bail hearings last. And so you can imagine these are really life-altering hearings where a magistrate will say, okay, here's the charge, and what is the district attorney, what are you asking for? And so you don't really get a chance to know who the person is, and you're making these really quick decisions that can drastically impact someone's life.
So you used the word defendant a moment ago. I'm just going to pivot and call them a client. So who are your clients? What neighborhoods do they live in? What do we know about them in their communities?
So as a bail fund, our real goal is to really create sort of broad transformational change, and so our criteria for who we bail out is also pretty broad. And so I have to get into the weeds here a little bit, but so we have 4 main criteria. One is that a person not having any detainers, and I'll just explain briefly what a detainer is. And so if someone is on probation and they're arrested, the automatic detainer is lodged, and the only way they can be released is if their back judge lists the detainer. And so even if bail is set, they won't be released because of the detainer. So for folks with detainers, we don't get bail for. Our other criteria is that the person be indigent, and so one of our proxies for that.
Say that again, the person what?
Be indigent or poor. And so one of our proxies for that is that they be assigned a public counsel. So that be a public defender or court-appointed attorney. And I think that's really important because if you watch arraignments, and this happened in Dante's case, a magistrate will assign someone a public defender because of their low income status, and in the same breath assign them $50,000, $10,000 bail. And so we really place an emphasis on bailing out folks who are unlikely to afford it, which are folks assigned public defenders. We also really place an emphasis on bailing individuals out as soon as possible. As we know, the research shows that just 3 days in jail can drastically impact someone's life in terms of losing a job, custody of their children. So about 68% of the clients we bail out the same day as the arraignment. So we really try to make sure that they don't even get up to State Road. And then, as I was saying before, we get all our donations from the public, and so we don't have an abundance of resources, and so certain bails that we're just unable to pay. But recently, and we can talk about this later, we did a report, and what we found was both disturbing but not surprising. So 96% of the people we bail out are assigned public defenders at their hearings, and 80% are Black people in the city of Philadelphia. And then, interestingly, we took a map of the poor zip codes in Philadelphia, and also took a map of where we most serve people, and they were completely identical. And so the people we are serving are mothers, are caretakers, old, young, but it seems to be what they all have in common is being Black and poor in Philadelphia.
Thank you. Dante, I want to go back to something that you hinted on a moment ago. So for someone who can afford their bail, what does that pretrial time look like? And then also, for someone who cannot afford their bail, what does their pretrial time look like?
So, for me, my personal experience, first of all, before you go in front of that magistrate, after being arrested, you don't even know your charges. You don't know your charges until you walk into that room and someone says, you've been charged with, and what's common pretty much now is that police officers slam you with charges as much as they can, whether they fit or not. And in that particular instance, it doesn't matter because the magistrate reads that and comes up with a bail based upon what was written down, whether it's applicable or not. So, when you hear that bail, my bail amount was a set at $50,000. And I had a public defender on the screen who said, Your Honor, this guy has never been arrested before. He has no priors. And he said, this is a part of the story you don't know, but he said, I just saw him last night because this officer arrested me 2 nights in a row and charged him with the same crimes with no evidence, which is why I got dismissed. But he was making a point. And so, it's scary. It's scary to know that, you have no way to go home. It doesn't matter what you did. If you don't have the money, you're not moving. And so, you think about all the things in your life that are going to change. Like, your home's not going to be there when you leave. And what about your family? How are they going to get by? And you start to feel this guilt. Even though it's not your fault, that's your responsibility. And you can't live up to it because of the way the system is structured. And the whole innocent until proven guilty thing suddenly goes out the window. So, for somebody with bail, they're sitting in the cell with me, they're talking about, my people are coming to get me in a couple minutes. And it's not a big deal. But, the most time they say it's scary.
Yeah.
It's scary.
And I think just adding on that too, I think it's so important to highlight that despite the charge, right, if you have the money, you can be free. So one of the things I oftentimes like to remind people, if you are insert Harvey Weinstein and you you're charged with pretty serious crimes and you have $2 million to pay for your freedom, then you can be free. But for anyone in Philadelphia who doesn't have that wealth or money, then you are in jail for that amount of time. And I think, and Dante touched on this a bit, is that if you are incarcerated on bail, typically the district attorney will give you a choice, which is you can plead guilty and go home, or you can fight your case and stay here in jail, which isn't really a choice at all. And research has shown that if you are in jail on bail, you're 9 times more likely to plead guilty. And so what you have is this mass system of punishment that has people pleading to things that they probably didn't do. And so I think the difference between, too often, the difference between who's in jail and who isn't is not because of the alleged crimes, but who has money and who doesn't.
So I think that both of you perfectly just answered my next question, but I just want to open it up in case anything else comes to mind. What are some of the consequences folks don't normally think about when someone is unable to pay bail? Malik, you talked about this earlier when you were talking about your own experience, and you just finished your statement, Dante, by talking about some of those things. But I just wanted to ask you, in case anything jumped out, again, what are some of the consequences people don't normally think about when someone is unable to pay their bail?
What the biggest consequence that, of course, losing all the things that you have and your family being there, but it's once you plead to a charge, it's there for life. And, in that moment, I don't think that you can truly understand the impact of that. You see this, they often tell you, I'll give you this charge, you can go home, there'll be no jail time. There'll be no jail time there, right? But now you have this tail that follows you forever. I'm sorry. They told me this before I came.
You're still doing an awesome job.
So, it's just, like for me, I stopped and I looked at it and I said, I'm a 45-year-old black male, and I'm going to plead to a felony now at this stage of my life, and I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. My public defender told me he's seen a lot of innocent people go to jail. And I said, we're going to find out that works for me this time. Because, I just wasn't going to do it. I just didn't do it, and I wasn't going to do it. And thank God I didn't. But for so many people, so many times, that's the only option that they see that's going to allow them to get back to sustaining the life that they have. And it happens. It's terrible.
So the Philadelphia Bail Fund recently released their snapshot report for 2019. It's kind of like an annual report, and something stood out to me that I wanted to ask you both about. Can you tell us about the number of clients you have whose cases were dismissed or withdrawn versus the number of clients who were tried, convicted, and incarcerated?
Yeah. So we've so far bailed out about 160 people here in Philly, and at the end of last year, we wanted to just take a look and see the outcomes of the cases. And so, of the 80 cases that have resolved, the 75 cases that have resolved, 71% were dismissed or withdrawn before trial, and 24% ended with probation, so they were incarcerated, and about 5% were sentenced to jail. And so, I think it's really important. We labeled the report a window into what cash bail Indian cash bail can look like. And I think oftentimes we, particularly stakeholders and politicians, talk about these changes in the abstract, and I think it's great that we have bail funds because we can actually see what having these policies or really disrupting these policies can do. And I think one of the powerful things that came from the report was just showing the importance of what happens when people can fight their cases from home. And what our findings show is that, one, if a person is released and you provide them with text reminders and you provide them with transportation support, that the overwhelming majority show up. But also, I think what was pretty frightening about it is I just wonder what would happen if we hadn't intervened and those people were sitting in jail all that time. I think the numbers would have been drastically different.
So if most cases were dismissed or withdrawn before trial and only 5% were convicted and incarcerated, why is cash bail imposed at all?
That's a question I ask myself every day. I don't know, I can start, Dante, with your thoughts on it, but I think I think there are a couple reasons, but one is I think we have a resistance to changing. If you think about it, we have a system, I like to call it a system of mass punishment, and we have all these institutions and things built around that system staying as is. So if you have someone arraigned, there has to be someone in the courtroom, there has to be someone at the police district to hold them, there has to be correctional officers, there has to be all this infrastructure. And I think the people working within them don't have an interest in either not doing their jobs or significantly decreasing what we do currently. I think also a really important factor, and we've seen this in New York, is just fear that people have. It's really funny, well, it's not funny, but I was recently about a month ago at the hospital with my grandmother, and she had to get a procedure done, and a doctor said, there's a 10% chance that this could go wrong. She still did it. But I mention that because it's only in really the criminal justice sphere where, we can have a 1% chance of something bad happening, and we just decide we're not going to make any changes at all. And we can go into the reasons of why that is, but I think that's something that I think fear plays an important role, and I think, and we don't have to get into the safe injection sites, but I think that's another parallel example where we have fear creeping up. I would say locally in Philly, one of the challenges is just political will. I think that's really important. So we have the courts that don't seem to want to cooperate with any changes. We have a district attorney who has made some changes. It'd be great if there were more. But I think one of the challenges that we have, particularly as a bail fund, is we're trying to really change and dismantle the system. And I think in this environment of reform, most folks believe that it's already changed. And so I find for us, for example, trying to convince people that cash bail is still a problem, I have to do that. And I think that is a unique challenge that I think we have in Philadelphia.
I think the other reason they impose cash bail is they want you to miss court. That's a money-making thing. You miss a court date and that's their money. And it's that simple. And if you look at the logic behind it, if you're incarcerating someone because in some way you feel as though they're a danger to society, I don't know why that danger is less than $5,000 or $6,000 or $7,000 later. It just doesn't make sense. So, jails need money and court systems need money, and this is a lot more expensive than a ticket. And it just takes one little slip up, and that money's we're going to keep 10% anyway. So, I just think that, it's a calculated risk. Put him out on bail with the cash, and we'll see if he shows. A lot of they say, well, pay up when you catch up. So it's like, yeah, have a run. We got the money, and we'll see him again later. So, I just think that has a lot to do with it, money, finance.
I think also I'd just like to point out that the Pennsylvania Constitution is actually pretty good on bail, in the sense that there are so many other considerations that are supposed to be taken before bail is set, and every day our courts violate that. And the ACLU has sued for bail practices in Philadelphia being unconstitutional. We're still trying to figure out what exactly will come of that lawsuit. But one of the things we have gotten is a report from all the stakeholders, this came out about a month ago, agreeing to changes. And I think one of the things that's going to be so important in the coming months is putting pressure on leaders to really make the changes. But I think, and we had I just want to mention this because we had a people's hearing in January where we invited folks like Dante and others who had direct experience with cash bail. And I think for me, it was one of the most powerful events we had because it's so important, especially when we're competing with voices from folks who have no interest in really changing the system. I think there's important narrative shifting work that needs to be done. And so lifting up people who, while on bail, prospered and was able to do things that they wouldn't have been able to do in jail. I think that work is something that we really need to invest in as folks who really care about making changes, because I think ultimately that's really the answer to the fear that we're seeing, is to uplift the stories of people who are really thriving and free.
Yeah, I feel like both of you just kind of walked me into my next question, which is, what would you say to critics who argue that bail is necessary to maintain public safety?
Well, let's just say, since Malik bailed me out with the bail fund, one of the things that happened is I helped 7 different people get into a loan. I'm just particularly proud of that. Stuff like the bail fund and other organizations that I've been a part of, I missed the 60s, but I'm an activist now, you know what I mean? And just that experience in itself, it just kind of uplifted me to want to do something for somebody else. It just did, because I didn't know them. And I didn't feel like I don't want to say I didn't deserve it, but I didn't earn it, but I got it. And so if you got it, you got to give it. And that's just how it works. And so, I was with a group of people who empowered me with, the means and the cash to get out there and see what I could do to help other people. And so there's 7 people right now, 7 couples who are no longer homeless because somebody bailed me out of jail. So if you say that cash bail, is not, a way that lends back to society, I say, not so.
But I think also, our current system, as I said before, no matter the crime, if you have the money, you can be free. And so if one really cared about public safety, I don't think our current cash bail system does that at all. And I think it's also important to point out that there have been other jurisdictions that have gotten rid of cash bail. So Washington, D.C., New Jersey, and last time I checked, the sky isn't falling in those places. But I think what's important for us is that, if a person is a real threat or is believed to be a real threat to the public, then there should be due process in taking away their liberty. And that's what they do in D.C. So in D.C., about 86% of people are released pretrial, and then there are certain people who the courts find to be a real threat to the public. I think our current system doesn't even allow that. Our current system just says, despite the charge, we're just going to set a high bail, but if a person has the means, that they can get out. I also think it's really important, and this is sort of outside of bail, that we really sort of rethink what violence is, right? And so oftentimes we think of violence just being a crime someone commits, but I think having asbestos in schools is violence. I think not having resources for families, people who are homeless and don't have health care. I think those are the type of things that really lead to the violence we see. And I happen to think that the money that we spend, the millions we spend in caging people, could actually be used for those things to really address the root causes of violence. So I think, and in addition to our current system not actually adequately addressing public safety, I think we also need to move toward a larger conversation of what violence is and who's being inflicted upon.
Thanks. So last week, the Philadelphia Bail Fund won an important case allowing the public to record bail hearings. So that was not possible before last week, if I understand that case correctly. So can you tell us about that case and why it's important to be able to record a bail hearing?
Well, it's still not possible. We have 45 days for the courts to decide what they want to do. So we have a court watching program where we have members of the public come in to watch bail hearings. And I think it's really important for us because I think the system currently, it really masks what is actually happening there. And so we found that the way to really expose what's happening is by bringing members of the public inside. And I see a couple of court watchers in the audience, which is great. But the thing is that these hearings, these life-altering hearings where people's liberty is stripped away, are completely off record. There's no stenographer, there's no recording. And we released a couple of reports where we were able to sort of write down what we've experienced, but we think that recording will allow us to really shed light on what actually is going on there. And so we sued in federal court on a First Amendment claim to say that we have a First Amendment right to record these bail hearings. The judge last week ruled in our favor, and so we're really looking forward to, we're really looking forward to exposing what's happening, but we really see this as a tool for transparency and what's going on. A couple of weeks ago, I was watching a bail hearing, and there was a 19-year-old kid, and the bail was set that he couldn't afford. And I never forget, he asked the judge, he said, can you lower my price? And I thought, like, that is really, like, that's what this is, right? And I think being able to record and really expose the daily brutality of what's going on there will hopefully, I think it will be used as an accountability tool for what's going on, but also hopefully push us toward ending the system. But I just wanted to say 45 days, so no one should go recording tomorrow. Might get arrested.
Forgive me for not knowing. Wow, that was a really powerful story that I don't know how to follow that. So I guess I'll ask one concluding question and then we'll open it up to the audience. So you gave some really good examples of places where cash bail doesn't currently exist or has been abolished, and as you said, the sky's not falling down. That's not always the case. And there are places where the elimination of cash bail has increased the number of people detained pre-trial. Observers point out that in the absence of cash bail, sometimes judges are more likely to hold people pre-trial unless they're explicitly instructed not to. So my last question, which is a big one before we open it up to the audience, how does Philadelphia fix a bail problem, if it has one, without creating another problem in the process? So maybe abstractly, and then we'll open it up to the folks here.
I would say follow the Constitution. That's the one thing Pennsylvania can do. But I think we need to move toward a system, as I mentioned before, where the vast majority of people are released, and then we can have special, and this is what happens in other jurisdictions, have special detention hearings for folks we really think are a threat to the public. I think one of the challenges, and I think you mentioned Maryland and California, is, well, one thing I'll just mention about that is, oftentimes we talk about ending cash bail, but we've been trying to sort of change our language to say we want to end cash bail and pretrial punishment, because oftentimes what happens, and this happens in so many places. So there is a lot of talk, for example, about ending incarceration, and the system always tries to find a way to continue what it does, right? And so instead of incarcerating people, we're just going to slap electronic monitors on everyone. And so I think getting rid of cash bail, what we could have is in other jurisdictions where instead of holding people on cash bail, we're just going to detain everyone. And I think that just, for us, means that we have to fight toward ending the system, but we also have to be vigilant and consistently monitoring what's going on. But in Pennsylvania, at least, the solution is pretty simple in terms of following the Constitution, which courts and local stakeholders just don't seem to want to do.
Dante?
Innocent until proven guilty. If I'm innocent until proven guilty, I shouldn't have to pay for my freedom. Freedom is the right of everyone in the nation. And like, I just want to say, you know, we talk about this bail system, but you know, the problem starts before you make it to that room. The problem starts when these police officers are given the latitude to charge you whatever they want. You know, these are law enforcement, these guys are, you know, protect and serve. They're not lawyers. And so when you're giving them this ability to decide, you know, what a person should be charged with, and then you just give them carte blanche, you just do whatever they want, I think the problem starts there. So by the time you get into the room when it's time to get bail, the problem's already too big. I mean, before you even get there, they're telling you, I can work with you, I can make a deal. You know, they're bartering already. You know, let me, you know, help me out and do my job, or I'm gonna lock you away. And like, you know, so, like, before you get to that magistrate, before you get to that room, like, you know, when you're in the back of that car, man, that's when your problem really starts. And I just wanna bring this to light. So, what I realized lately is, Kensington's up on the rise. And so, what police officers are doing consistently is arresting people for possession and charging them with manufacturing and intended delivery. And what this does is keeps them in jail. You know, so now, instead of this revolving door, as they say, with people going in and out using, they're putting false charges on people in an attempt to hold them in jail longer, thus thereby making them take these deals. And it's criminal. It's criminal. It's criminal to charge people with things you know they didn't do. And, you know, I just need everybody to know it because they're going to keep doing it as long as nobody's looking at it and no one's saying anything about it. And I'm watching it over and over and over again. And like, yeah, I beat my case, but like, how many more people, you know, don't have the support I have, don't have the bail fund, don't have friends who go out and do, you know, what do you call that thing? GoFundMe's and, you know, stuff. I had support, you know, but so many people don't. And, you know, it's scary. It's just scary, man. So I just wanted to say that. I was going to say that.
Thanks, Dante. I see your hand in the back. Before I open it up to Q&A, can we get one more round of applause for First question.
So I have one quick comment before I ask my question. And the moderator asked, what happens to you, you know, during that time you're in jail? As a physician, I know that people who are spending that 48 hours or 72 hours before they get to State Road, if they're on chronic medications, they are not getting their medication. And I think people need to know that because that's a real health issue. It's also a public health issue. So, but my question, you sort of danced around the fact that it's part of the Constitution. So can you be more specific about what we need to do? Do we need to pressure people to change the law? And if so, who do we need to pressure?
Thank you.
Yeah. I think there are 2 points of pressure. Right, the way bail works is one, it's requested by the district attorney, and secondly, it's set by the courts, the judge. I think one of the things, and this hopefully we'll get more information on this soon in terms of what the Supreme Court says, but I think one of the 2 things we need to do is put pressure on the district attorney to really, we didn't talk about this before, but the district attorney 2 years ago announced that they weren't going to request bail on certain charges. It was 25 charges, and quite frankly, I don't think those people probably should have been arrested anyway, in my opinion. But we haven't had any changes since then. And so one of the things that we can do, that the district attorney can do tomorrow, and we've done it, and this has been done in San Francisco, is say that I'm not gonna request bail, or I'm gonna request it in very few cases. But I think the real hurdle is putting pressure on the courts. And one of the things that we're working with other organizers is trying to figure out how we can put pressure on the courts to really make changes. But I would say the courts and the district attorney are two places where we really need to put pressure. And more should be coming out on that too.
There's a lot that I could talk about.
Well, I should say, you can also, sorry, you can also come to watch a bail hearing as well.
Okay, so I do volunteer in a prison in Chester. What I want to say is, I would like, and this is my current project that I want to get off, really get going, and that is to bring people like yourselves into organizations to educate the public about what's going on. Now, right now, the cultures, there's more being visual things, movies and programs, articles in the paper. However, if any of you belong to organizations, churches, groups of any kind, that it would be of interest to have, there are other men that I could get in touch with as well, who would come and speak, so that the world begins to see these individuals as the human beings that they are and what they've been through and what our system is doing, how it's damaging. And it's costing all of us in taxes to keep the system going. Anyway, I could think more. I want to give other people a chance.
Here, I'll take it from here. Thank you. I'm going to skip you, but I'll come back to you. I saw your hand a moment ago right here.
What's the average bail that A, is set in Philadelphia, and B, that the bail fund pays?
So the bail fund, I think last time we did our numbers, our average bail we're posting is about $1,600. And so the lowest bail we've paid is $40. And that was a person who was homeless and sat in jail for 3 weeks, unable to pay bail. And the highest we paid is $7,500. So I should mention in Philadelphia, bail is set and then you have to pay 10% of that. And so bail can be set at $75,000, you pay $7,500. You know, oh no, and I think for the average in Philadelphia, I don't have that number precisely. I don't know if.
2,500.
Huh?
Around 2,500.
Yeah.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
That sounds about right. You know, like with drug charges and non-violent crime, they usually get something from $25,000 down. And then when you see with violent crime, you watch them numbers go up a little bit. But yeah, anybody like, seems like it's gonna cost somewhere around $2 grand to get out of jail in Philadelphia. Yeah.
And is that number the 10%, or is that the?
That's the 10%. The 2,000 will be the 10%.
Okay.
Yeah, 20,000.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I just want to ask, how do we, you have information for us, or somehow we can get in touch with you, or get more involved?
Yeah, Philadelphia.org, but I mean, we can talk afterwards. I mean, we run a court watch program, so weekly we have folks go in to watch bail hearings. And we're mainly interested in giving folks observations, but we also collect information on bail set and the charge and those things, which is really important. And then we have volunteers who actually do the bailout work of actually bailing individuals out. So yeah, I'd be happy to talk about
Do you
that.
have a website?
Yeah, Philadelphia.org.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yo, this was so wonderful. Both of you were so eloquent. I have a question to both of you. It seems as if like police are responding to possession, like basically possession, not trying to actually be not like quote unquote an issue anymore by adapting through lies and promoting basically more like hyper incarceration, more on drugs. How can we actually like address this like issue of cops being liars, just as what you were brought to? My words, not yours.
So, I know a lot of people are familiar with the encampments that were in Kensington, those encampments. And so the district attorney during that time told the police, you're not to arrest anyone there for a drug possession charge. It's a medical problem, we're incarcerating, we're transporting, we're housing, we're medicating, and we're feeding. And we're sitting in court people who have, you know, a drug issue, and we're constantly running them back and forth from the courts. So, don't arrest them. And so what they did was, they stopped arresting people for possession, and started charging them with other things. And so, in an attempt to try to address a problem, it created a much greater problem. And so I think that what you have to do is, honestly, is you know, these officers need to be vetted. They just need to be vetted. Like, you just can't give a guy a badge anymore and assume he's going to do his job. You have to look at the numbers. You have to look at the trends. You have to look at you got to talk to the people. You got to see what's going on, because this like sitting back and letting the system happen mentality, like people are like they're falling through the cracks.
So we've got one question over here, and then I'm gonna skip over to the other side. Okay?
A couple of times you've mentioned violence and what reconsidering what violence is, and it seems to me that it's violence to us when it's done to us, but it's punishment when a system does it. And it seems to me that the system we have is not a justice system, it's a punishment system. It's a punishment system to have children grow up in poverty. It's a punishment system to have bad schools. And on and on and on. I mean, I actually have a whole book outline on punishment. But given that a punishment system, why in the world would you think that police, judges, and district attorneys have any interest in truth? Little question.
I have no answer for that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really powerful question. And I think I like the way you started it off, because oftentimes, you know, I hear people talk about criminal justice reform or reform in our criminal justice system, and I always get a bit uneasy when we talk about that, because as you mentioned about punishment, I mean, I just refer to it as our criminal legal system, because I never want to imply that the current system either cares about justice or is actually pursuing it, right? Yeah, I think you raise a really important point, but I would say that all the major changes that we've had in history, I mean, you can look back to slavery, you can look back to Jim Crow, I mean, the odds were always stacked. And that just pushes us to fight even more, and really keep up. Maybe I should end on that.
No, I just want to say really quickly, you know, so many people are used to, I hear people say all the time, you know, it's not perfect, but it's the best system we got.
Right.
And when we get out of this mentality of thinking like, it's broken, but we should accept it, then maybe we can get the mentality of saying, it's broken, let's try to fix it. You know what I'm saying?
All right, I got a question right over here.
Hello, thanks for everything that you set up there, set up there. I just wanted to know if you could kind of just talk a little bit about this, like what you were saying around like possession and who gets charged with possession, greater intent, and some of the things that are going on with the overdose crisis, opioid epidemic. We see different ideas of who is innocent, who should be cared for, and things like that. So we want to talk about that. Some of the clear racism that is happening right now, and then but like what we should do going forward too.
So being at ground zero, being out there, I mean, Philadelphia is gentrified, man, and it's everywhere. And it's hard when you're building for these people, when they're building $400,000 houses on Lehigh Avenue, and there's an encampment a half a block away. And so, you know, the idea of, I'm gonna put this kid in jail and he'll be back here tomorrow in the same spot, that ain't selling those houses. And so, you know, this is the new tactic. And, you know, it's just, see, it's a new tactic, but it's harsh. It's super harsh. Because you pit a person against the entire system. And it's just ain't fair. So, like, you know, I'm screaming it from the rooftops, man, because I can't watch it anymore. I can't watch it, and maybe I can't stop it, but I'll just keep screaming about it until maybe somebody else screams about it, and somebody else screams about it, because, like, it's not right. You know, there's a whole generation of people right now being lost to opiates right now. And with that being said, that don't give you a right to lock them away and throw away the kid. And I'm not gonna watch that.
Yeah, sorry.
No, I'm done.
No, I was just gonna say, and I guess this sort of goes back to your question, 'cause that question really stuck with me. Because I think one of the interesting things, particularly about bail funds, right, is that we're not just protesting and really trying to demand things. But the great thing about bail funds is that, like, we're actually, like, actively freeing people. And we're not waiting for the system to do that. I mean, of course, we're still pushing, but I think that's really important because I think with every single person, like people like Dante, we're disrupting the status quo and really showing that a just system is possible and that we're going to continue fighting for it.
So I think we've got time for one more question. I'm going to come across to you. But if you didn't get your question asked, we're going to go to a reception immediately following this, and I believe that Malik and Dante will stick around and answer questions that you have. Also, my last plug, there's a survey on your seat. If you wouldn't mind filling that out before you leave, I would personally really appreciate it. I'm going to hand it over for the last question.
I wanted to piggyback off what you said. I came in late, so I don't know your name, but in reference to, because I have been in Kensington as well, I'm just giving them some of the folks who were living in that campment, like sweets, because they really, and I noticed we were continuing to go there, and it was no hands-on. Don't touch these people, but what they started to do was with young white women were the police officers were now saying, oh, we'll give you some food as well. We'll take you to the local Chinese store. And then they started trumping charges on these women saying they solicited them for prostitution to get money out of the officer. And then they can lock them up for that. But I want to ask you, Malik, where do our judges, because we know there are a lot of mentally ill people who keep coming to vicious cycle through the sentence and people, addicts, who are keep coming. Are you having any, like, harsh statements from judges? Because there are some judges that are stuck saying, this bail reform, I really don't want to release these people, although they know really they should release. Some of these crimes aren't worth staying behind bars or going behind bars. Let's wait and bring them back to court. Are you getting any feedback from any judges?
Yeah, well, I think it's important to point out, particularly as it relates to bail, is that the magistrates aren't judges, so they're appointed, and we know that two of them are siblings in political families in Philadelphia. They're not lawyers, so they don't really have much training. I think I would say that there are particular magistrates that are really problematic in setting bail, and also use very discriminatory, racist language that shouldn't be said in court. And so I remember once, the magistrate, she's no longer there now, but she was saying, you know, these people can pay for their hair and nails. I don't understand why they can't, pay for bail. So I'm not going to say that is the majority of the magistrates, but I think there is this thinking that this is the way the system works, and my role is just to continue doing it. And some of the magistrates have been there since the 80s, so they've been doing it for some time. So, yeah, I think we're in an uphill battle, but the magistrates consistently do what they've been doing for a long time, which is jail people on money. But the judges are a whole other issue that I'm sure you know how awful some of them can be.
Dante, final remark? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, but Roy, like in hearing you say, I'd be more than happy to go anywhere and speak. Give anybody my number, call me anywhere to speak.
Well, I mean, people say, yes, they're interested in bringing you to, and I know some men do anything, I need venues.
The only problem is that it's with Dante, you need to tell them to get there 2 hours
Ooh.
before.
One more round of applause for our speakers. Thank you guys very much. We're going to have a reception right here at the doors. Thank you all for coming. See you next month here at Searchlight.
I'll take it to the gym tomorrow.